Okay, so before I get going, give me some keywords that you learned from part one. What did you, just give me a word that you learned in part one. I'll give you one, C#, right? Sure, that's one. But come on, what else from part one when I showed you guys the program? IDE, yeah, that's an IDE. Okay, let's go into the theory a little bit. It was a word that started with an O, and then a B, and then a J. Object, yeah. And what did I say every object consists of? Two things. Properties and, yeah, and functions or methods, right? Properties. And we learned that that's also a little tool window in C#'s IDE is there's a properties tool window. So as you add an object to your design, you can change its properties. Now the other thing about objects is its functions or its methods. That's what it can do. Obviously that's going to be a part of coding, right? So that's where we're going next, is that's going to be the code part. Like right now we're just designing it so it looks nice. It has a certain look to it or certain properties, but it doesn't actually function in any way yet. So that's coming next, okay? Now in this IDE, we set that up with the properties, okay? That's pretty good. If you've got that down from the first part, you've got really all you need to move on to the next part, okay? That you can set up a project in the IDE, you can design it and change its properties, etc. Maybe we could look at it this way, okay? If we think of general problem solving, understand the problem, choose a solution model, analyze the model, fill it out, find a solution and check the solution. And now we apply this to what we've learned in C#. We can go, okay, we read the problem. I gave you the problem. I gave you a sheet that said, here, design these 5 things. So you didn't have to, so you basically had to read it, sort of ask me if you didn't understand anything, get clarification, so you understood the problem. Then your model was C#, okay? And then for using the model, you did your design using the toolbox and the properties window. That's really all you needed to do. Then to actually check it, you'd run the program, and then to check it, you'd basically then, okay, well, I'll hand it in, right? That's the check part. So that's the 5 steps now for that particular problem. But now we move into the next phase, into now adding functionality, it being able to do something, to our designs. Okay. So that's what I just said. C# has controls in it that allow us to do this. And what you build is what we talked about in our first unit, a user interface, something the user uses, okay? You do that by adding objects and changing properties, okay? Now, outside the world of computer science, a good interface is something that users can interact with. So this looks like a nice looking car here, right? So we got a nice looking user interface, right? Nice leather interior, you know, looks good, little satellite GPS built in. Not a bad user interface. As opposed to, say, this user interface, right? Now, it could be that behind the hood of this vehicle is an incredible engine, whereas behind the hood of this thing is a hunk of junk. But to the user, they still like the interface. The interface draws them in. And now you guys have seen how you can design that beautiful or not so beautiful looking interface at that level. Real simple. Design the user interface. This is, by the way, what some of our coursework like graphic arts and stuff like that, they are all about that look and that design. But obviously, we got to get behind the interface and now working on getting it to do something. Otherwise, it's not really a computer science course. It's like a graphic arts course. Okay. Here's some of the stuff you've done in the first assignment. Now, you may or may not have used all of these, depending on where you are or depending on the problem you solved. But you had all these objects kind of built into the first assignment, plus the form. Don't forget that the form itself is an object. Okay. You also learned about some of the properties. In doing the assignment, chances are you had to change some or all of these properties. So the most common one is the text one. We did that in our example. Background color, we did that one as well. Border style. You may or may not have had to play with that one. That changes the style of the border. The font. The foreground color. Here's one that maybe some of you encountered when playing with some of those properties like check boxes or radio buttons. There's a property called enabled, which determines whether or not the user can actually use the object. This is a simple change. I'll show you right here. I have a simple interface set up with one radio button right there, right? So if I play this right now and let this run, the user should be able to use that radio button. See, they can check it off. However, if I go in and change the property of that called enabled to be, and here's a quick pro tip kids, whenever you have a property that's either true or false, like this, just double click right here and it toggles true, false. Just speeds you up. So if I set it to false and then I play it, it's there, but it's grayed out, or in other words, enabled is set to false. It's disabled, so the user can't check it. That might be something you'll need for, say, some of the assignments. Okay. Visible. Believe it or not, this is a property that you could play with. So I don't see where you'd need it at this point, but let's say this button right here. If I set the property called visible to false, when I play it, it's not visible. Now, you'll be thinking, well, what good is that? Why would I even bother putting it on there? Well, it will be good once we start getting into the coding part, obviously. Okay, so that's just a quick little thing to just, if we need it, make it visible or not. Now, some of you might have got to the part where you want to change pictures. Okay, like the picture box object, for example. So here I put one on there. This is the picture box. So the picture box, pardon me, has some properties. The one that you'd want to use to change the picture is the property called image. And right now you can see, or maybe you can't, right there, that it's set to none. There is no image in that picture box. So when you're going to do graphical images in C#, always my recommendation would be to get a picture, obviously, from the internet, or you draw it yourself, or you take it from some Photoshop program, or whatever, right? So random topic, please. Please, random topic. Turtles, thank you. Okay. So say I get this picture of a turtle. It's a very nice picture of a turtle. Okay. And I go to it, eventually. There it is. So my recommendation in C# is always save the picture. Okay. So I'm going to save this to my desktop. Save. Okay. Then what I'd recommend you do in C# is you go to that property called image, and right now it's set to none. Click on the button with 3 dots. What's that called? Anyone remember? Ellipse, right. Click on the ellipse, and what you get here is a little dialog box. Remember I said the ellipse always brings up a dialog box that says, okay, you want a picture, where do I get it from? So obviously what you want to do is you're importing this picture. So I'm going to hit import, and I'll go to where I saved it, which was the desktop. And there it is, picture of the turtle. And I open it, and I click OK. And it should load the picture of the turtle in there. Now, what's the problem? Well, the problem is the picture was so huge that this box is not large enough to fit it. Okay? So I could make the box larger, but luckily C# offers another option for you. Okay? There's a property of the picture box called size mode. Okay? Because you want to resize the picture. What you don't want to change is the property just called size, because what that changes is the size of the box. But size mode gives you a few different options. So right now it's set to normal. If I go stretch image, okay, there, the turtle's better. But notice what it's doing, it's stretching it. So if I do this, it's going to do that wacky thing with it. Right? So it skews it. The height to width ratio is off. Then I could try auto size. Well, that auto size the box. So now the box is the right size. Okay, well I didn't want that. Center image. Well, that centers it, but it doesn't resize the image. So now I've still got the giant turtle. So the one I'd actually recommend is the bottom one, zoom. The zoom option keeps the same height to width ratio, so it doesn't actually make your picture look strange, but you can resize this box nicely at this point and have a picture of a turtle or whatever you're having a picture of work properly. So that's a little tip you're going to need whenever you do pictures. And I know you're going to want to. You're going to want to put pictures in things, lots of things. So that's the property you want to change. Oops. For that. Now there's one other one here that we kind of take for granted. And we'll get into this later in the course, but when you actually move things around with the mouse, it's setting something called the location. And if you take a look, whoops, in C#, this box right now has the property location, and there's two numbers there. That's an X and a Y coordinate. But notice when I drag it to a new spot, those numbers will automatically change for me. Okay? Don't worry too much about that. I just want to kind of throw that out there that that's what's happening there. Okay. Size, we talked about. But now let's get into some more that, again, some of you might have got stuck with the thing. A form itself can also have properties. You can actually set a background image into your form. And then you can also change the layout of that background image. Okay? So let me show you real quick how that would work. Let me find, I need another random topic, please. Okay? And I actually want this to be a really small picture. So I'm going to go down to just like icon size cat picture. So here, this is a nice little one. It's even animated. The animated may not work, and I'm going to save that one. Okay? So now I go to C# and I click on my form. Okay, remember, it's important you select the object for the property for which you're changing. Okay? And now here, there's this form, whoops, sorry. So then what you want to look for, whoops, is the background image. Now again, you're not going to find this property on some of the objects because it's an object specifically for forms, or property specifically for forms. Okay? So I'm now clicking on my form and I go up to background image. This time I'm going to import the little kitty picture. Click OK. And there it is. Okay? This is a process known as tiling. Just like the tiles on the floor, it lays it out in that way. Okay? If that's what you want, right? You can also, for your form, go to background layout. And you can see, again, it has tile, center, stretch, zoom, right? So if I choose zoom, you get that. If I choose stretch, center, or none just pops it up here in the corner. So again, it depends kind of what you want for your design. Let's go back to that, that tiling. This just looked awful. There we go. So actually, no, I'm gonna remove this. By the way, if you want to remove it, it can be a little bit tricky. You kind of have to delete it from the little box there. Okay. So there. Now, in addition, a couple other properties you can play with a form include the control box and the border style. Now, the border style is a pretty simple one. It just sort of changes the outside appearance. But the one called control box is probably terminology that you weren't aware of. I doubt you were using that term. If I set control box to be false and then play this thing, okay, what difference do you notice it made to the form? Yeah, it's lost the ability to minimize, maximize, and close. Actually took those away. So now the control of this form has been removed. I still have the little control box sort of heading up there, but if I wanted to, I'm going to have to hit stop now back here. If I wanted to, I could also go to Form Border Style, and one of the options I could change, for example, is None. Now when I play it, I get that. So I have no controls and nothing like that. Now, if you wanted to, you could get even fancier. There's a property of forms called, actually, wait, form border style. There we go. I'm going to set this to, and again, there's lots of different options there. So again, this is how you could make like a full screen sort of application that, oh, I know what it is. Sorry. It's at the very bottom of forms, and it's called window state. And right now it would start normally. But if I wanted to, I could change that to maximized. Now when I play this, I get no controls, full screen form. Okay? So it's got that. So now you would have to build in the way to get out of this thing. Okay? Again, a lot of you maybe play games that are kind of full screen like this. I'm not saying it necessarily did it this way, but this is a way you could do it. Now this is a tricky one for those of you who don't know a little bit about controls. How do I now shut this off? Well, the way I would do it is I would normally just go to C# and hit stop. But I'm not in C# and I can't see it anymore. It's gone. So for those of you who don't know, a way you can switch between programs if you can't see your taskbar is to hold down Alt and press Tab. You may have seen me do this before. This is a way I can switch between programs. So now I switch back to C# and I can hit stop. Okay? So stuff to play around with a little bit with your designs. Okay. So far, so good. Now, other ones you could play with. Opacity we looked at when we did our little web designer. Maximize box and minimize box. Those specifically target the ability to minimize and maximize a form if you want. Okay? So for example, I could say that this will start normal, that the control box is true, and that the form border style is sizable. So this would be like the normal way it was when it first started, right? So I've got this, I've got my controls, but if I wanted to, I could take away each one individually. So for example, I could take the one called max box, set it to false, and min box, set it to false, or give them the ability to minimize but not maximize. So now you can see they can't click this button, but they can click this button. So you are really in control of all that stuff as you start playing around with it. Okay? Start position determines where it starts. You can have it start in the center, or it'll just sort of put the window wherever it thinks it wants to place it. And the window state one is the one I worked on before, whether you want it to start minimized, maximized, etc. And then one last one that's kind of cool is the idea of the icon. Okay? The icon property is what appears in two places. It appears here when you're running it, like up in the corner, the top left corner, up here. And that's true for any program you're running, up in the top corner. But there's one other place the icon property appears, and that's down here on the taskbar. Okay, and usually that's a little bit bigger down there. And you can change that. You can put your own icons in there. Okay, so for example, I set my form. Oops, better stop it. I'll go to icon. And here again, it gives you this option to choose an icon. The thing is, though, it doesn't choose picture files for this. To place an icon on a form, it has to be what's called an icon file, which ends in ICO. Okay, so it's not a JPEG or a GIF, it's an icon file. So you can search the internet for those if you want, but as well, if you go to my handout folder, which you've been to before, there's a folder called multimedia in the handout folder. And in the multimedia folder, I've been collecting icons over the years, including custom ones that students have made. And there's, I don't know, a couple thousand icons in there of different kinds. So, okay, I'm going to select the diamond. And there it is. So now my form has a custom icon, and down here it has a custom icon. If you're into that stuff, right? If you're into that level of design, you can certainly do that for your designs. Okay. So that's some stuff that goes deeper even into than the first assignment did in terms of design. All right. Picture box, we talked about the size mode one. Here's some ones I'm not going to demonstrate, but there's one called the numeric up-down. Okay? I'll just show you what it is. The numeric up-down is that little thing, the little thing that makes numbers go up and down. Okay? So with that one, you can change it to go up by numbers other than 1. You can change it to count in different values other than base 10. So in other words, it could count by like 8s instead of stuff like that. And what minimum and maximum it can rise up to. Okay? So there's all kinds of stuff for that. Again, probably nothing you're going to need till maybe the final project or something like that. There's a property called the link label. It's in one of the design assignments. It's essentially like a web link. Okay? And you can actually control what it connects to. It's like putting a little hyperlink on your programs if you want, right? So that might be something you do this year. You design something and say, for more information, click here. It would launch a website or something. The radio buttons or the checkboxes. If you want them checked off by default, you can set check to true. Okay? Now, by the way, you don't need to do that for the first assignment. You could have just ran it and then checked it. That would have worked too. Okay? Text box allows you to do multiple lines if necessary. Password char. Now, this is an interesting one. I'll just show you real quick. So here's a text box, right? This will be something we'll be using early on to get the user to type information in, right? So when you play this, it's a place where they can type, okay? If you want, there's a property for text boxes called password char. And what you can do there is you can put a character. So I'm going to put a star. That's the most traditional one. So now when I type in that text box, it just shows stars. It hides the actual characters. It doesn't have to be a char, by the way. You could put, like, I could put a question mark there. And then when I play this, like most password things, it's the char, it's the star, but you can do whatever you want with that, okay? So you can control that. Scroll bars, if you want multiple lines of input. Word wrap, sort of like what Microsoft Word does. It wraps the word to the next place. Buttons. Okay, so a few of you noticed some little quirky details about buttons, like the little underline characters. That's called a mnemonic, okay? If you are interested in that, you can read that. And you can actually put pictures on buttons as well. If you think about, like, toolbars, that's what they are, right? They're buttons with pictures on them, right? And there's some stuff there about that. Now, some of you asked me about the tab control. It's in the assignment, so some of you might be confused with this thing, this tab control. And it is kind of a confusing object. Tab control, very much like the one called the group box, which is this one. These two objects, the group, it's hard to see on the projector, but it's got that thin line. These are objects used to sort of organize stuff. My recommendation always is draw those things on first before you draw stuff on top of them. Okay? So if you do it the other way around, it can often be very tricky to get it lined up that way. But as far as the tab one is concerned, you'll have to add a tab to this for doing the design. Okay? The easiest way to do this is when you have this tab control on there and you click on it, you'll notice a little thing pop up right there. Like another button that normally you don't get that, but the tab control gives you that one because it allows you to add more features to it. So if I click on that, I can add a tab or remove a tab. So if I add a tab, now I have 3 tabs. Now each of the tabs can also be kind of controlled independently. So if I go to the second tab and stuff like that. So another way to do this is the tab control has this little thing up here called application settings, which you can go, what is it? I've forgotten. Tab pages, that's what it's called. So if you go to the property called tab pages, and it says collection, if you click on the ellipse, it gives you more specific control of each tab. So I can go to tab 1 and then go down to its text. Where is it? Go to A to Z. There we go. And I can call this one cats. And then I can go to tab 2 and go down to text and call this one dogs, right? So here you can see how I can change the specific tabs as I move along. And again, chances are you're not going to use this, but it was in the design assignment, and some of you maybe are curious about it. Okay. Is there any other questions about the design assignment that I haven't covered yet in this? I think that should do it. Okay. Now we move on. The most common mistake I found people were doing on that design assignment was they were trying to change the property called name. It's at the top of the list, by the way. For some strange reason, you may have noticed, name is not being sorted alphabetically. So for example, here's a button. Here's all its properties, and they're all in alphabetical order, right? So visible's on the bottom. You can see here, L, M, P, S, T. Like it's going in alphabetical order, except for one. At the very top of the list, well, except for a couple, but at the top of the list, there's a couple here that are out of alphabetical order, including the one called name. This one is super important, okay? This is not something you see on the design. This thing is for code, okay? This is for your code. That's why, by the way, those things are in brackets. They're saying, well, these are properties, but they're not really things you're going to see. Now, name in code is a way to be organized. By default, it's going to give it a name, but it has no idea what you're going to be using this button for. So it gives it a very generic name. Just like in Scratch, when you put a cat on there, it called it, do you remember? Sprite1. It had no idea what it was, just put a name to it. We need to name this thing. More specifically, rename these things. Because the names they give them are insufficient once we start coding. Okay? So this is now a step in our process. So we get a problem. I give you a problem. You read it, you understand it. You get to C#, you do your design, you change your properties. The next step is to name things. Okay? Your specific names. This is an important step. And it's a step that should be done next and not later on, or you're going to end up kind of messing with your own logic there. Okay? So as it says here, C# automatically names something. Even the form has a name, because it's an object, but you need to give it a different name. You need to rename it. Okay? So to do this, just like you did with other properties, you select the object, go to name, and type in a new name. But as you type it in, there's some rules for this. Okay? You cannot break these rules. First rule, it must start with a letter. Second rule, it cannot exceed 40 characters in length, not that you'd ever want to. Next rule, it cannot contain any punctuation or spaces. So you can't call something like the exit space button. It won't allow that. No space is allowed. You can't call it the exit dash button. It won't allow it. You can't say exit dot button. Won't allow it. So how could I call it exit button without spaces or punctuation? Any ideas? That's right. Same thing we did in Scratch. But as well, in addition to these have to rules, there's also a style to this. The style is not a have to, but other programmers are expecting it. So this is called a naming convention. It's a good idea. So the way we're going to name stuff that are design objects is using a 3-letter ID or a prefix. Okay? So for example, forms will start with FRM, checkboxes, combo. Now, you in no way need to memorize this, and you in no way need to follow this particular convention. But what I'm basically saying is, so I've done my design, and I want to name this button. Let's say this was an exit button. I'd go to the property called name, and sure, I could call it exit. I could even call it exit button using camel cases. But what I'm going to suggest is, for all your stuff that's in your design, start the name with a 3-letter ID to identify what it is. So this is a button. So what 3 letters should I use to shorten up button? BTN. Most students say BUT, but that one I wouldn't recommend because it has a different context. So yeah, let's go with BTN, button, and then I'll just say exit. Okay? Now here you can see I'm still using camel casing. But the second I see this when I get to code, I'll go, oh, I know what that is. That's my exit button. It just makes sense, right? So that 3-letter ID just identifies what it is, and then the name you give it. Okay? Now, I'll do the same thing for something like this text box. Let's say I use this text box to get user input. It's a text box. What 3 letters should I use for it? Could use TEX. I'd be fine with that. Could use TXT. I'd be fine with that too. And maybe I'll just call it input. Oops, no, that was in out. Input. Okay? Sure. That's great. Okay? So the process is not that difficult. You give it a 3-letter ID, and then you give it a name. Okay, we're going to do this in an example in a sec. Okay, so this is not the example we're going to do. But here you can see I put a label on there. I give it a 3-letter ID, LBL for label. Could have also been LAB. That would be fine. And then display. So I don't need you to memorize the 3-letter ID. Just come up with one that makes sense to you. And then you won't have to memorize it. Okay. All our objects are then named. We name everything using the rules and the standards. Okay? The rules you can't break, or it won't allow it. The standards are just a good idea. And yes, I will be marking for those. Okay? This is all still done while you're designing it. Okay? Before you try to run it for the first time. So now it adds another piece of work to your to-do list. So you do your design, you change your properties, and then you name everything. This is super, super important that this order is followed. Okay? So now the order, again, 1. Okay, you understand the problem. So we got that. So then you do your design. And the design process involves you drawing on objects. So you add objects. And that comes from the toolbox, right? That's where we get all those objects from. Then we change the properties. And that comes from the properties window, or the properties tools. We did that for all of assignment 1, but now I add another level to this. We name all our objects. This is super important because the next thing we're going to do is code. But I honestly think at this point there's a big divider between that stuff and code. And I've seen it for 16 years. Even though I haven't taught C# for 16 years, I've taught similar type programs. For students who jump to the coding too quickly, you'll end up not getting a successful program. Slow down, do this first, then think about coding. This is easy, right? Doing the interface, making it look beautiful, changing stuff, naming stuff. Once that's all done, only then should you start thinking about coding, okay? I can't stress that enough. All right. So now we're ready to start coding stuff, okay? So this is the process. Once we get to code, we don't look back. The rest of the course is about code, okay? So in most applications, you want to change the properties of the objects, okay? We do this using dot notation. Okay, not period notation, okay? And the process is pretty simple. You put the name of the object, a dot, an equal sign, and then the new property. Again, we're going to do this in an example. So here's a basic way. Here's a label, here's a button, okay? So let's do this right now. So everybody, whatever design you have, just get rid of everything on this little scrap thing we're working on. Stick a label on there and a button. That's all you need. A label and a button. Name the button, or put on the button, change it, and in your label put the words hello world. If you want, change the font of the label. Doesn't matter though if you don't. Okay, but I'm just going to make it bigger so it's easier for you guys to see it from your spot. So I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger. Font and a button. Okay, so pretty simple design. Okay? Now this is everything we've done in part 1. Simple enough. A design, change properties. Now let's add the feature, or the step that I was talking about. Let's name our stuff. Okay? So let's name our button. Find your button. It's probably called button 1. Go to the top, find the property called name. And I'm going to name mine BTN change. It's going to change something. So this is my button for changing. Notice the camel casing, the capital C. Now I'm going to change my label to LBL output. Keep it simple. Okay. So my label was just called LBL output. Again, I don't care if you use LBL. You could use LAB. Don't make it be something weird though, like XZY or something for labels, and you know. And remember, it has to be letters. It can't be numbers. You can put numbers in the name. You just can't. It has to start with a letter. Okay. Are we done? Is everything named? No. One thing left. What is it? The form, right. Always forget about the form. A way again to check this is click that little drop-down button over in the properties window and check. Oh, the form. I'm going to call mine FRM example, just for simplicity's sake. Okay. So now when you look in this drop down here, you can see this is named, all three things are named. They're my names. I know what they're called now. They're like my children. I've given them names. So I'm in charge of them now as a programmer. This is a super important step again. It's a little more work now to do this, but as we enter the world of code, it's super crucial that you do this. Because you are taking control of these objects. Yes, I know C# gives them a name by default, but it has no idea what name it should be, so it uses very generic names. So we take control by naming it ourselves. Okay. Anyone lost? Now, at this point then, we are ready to enter a whole new world. A whole new world. Never mind. So to code something, at this point you have to think a little bit like a user. So a user in a program uses certain objects. Some of them they just look at, some of them they don't even look at, but they actually only interact with certain objects in a program. So for example, in this simple program, is the user going to use the label? No. Okay, I know it's not you guys. But what they are going to use is the button. The button is the only thing they're going to use. To get to code, double-click the button. Double-click. And the whole world changes. We are now in a world of code. Okay? The code, a lot of code's there for you already. Most of which all of what's there, you don't touch. Because if you do, you break it. Okay? But I want you guys to code smart. Okay? So at this point, because you're now in the world of code, this is the part where you may want to start unpinning some of your little things here. Now, the way C# works is it works on a tab-based system. So if you want to get back to your design, you can click on this tab to go back to your design. And now if you want to go back to code, you can switch between them. But at this point, too, you may want to start thinking, I want more room for this code. So I'm going to unpin some of these windows so I have more code room. That's a good idea. The next thing is this code might be really small, hard to read. So to change the size, hold down your control key and roll your mouse. And it will zoom in on the code that you're working on. Now, what you may have noticed, my apologies, is you're given a flashing cursor right there. That's telling you that this is the spot that I'm about to code. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but here's what essentially is happening. This flashing cursor is inside of this. Don't worry about what this is. It's a thing, a code thing, but it kind of gives you a clue as to what it is. It's something that's happening when you click something. Oh, okay. What am I clicking? I'm clicking this. What's that? Oh, that's my button. I named that, so I know what that is. I'm clicking on a button, and it's saying, what should I do when I click on it? Perfect. That's exactly what I want it to do. The rest of the stuff is a little more complicated. Take my grade 11 course, I go into more detail, and I'll go into more detail later in this course about what that is. But as well, again, not to get too complicated, whoops. But if I pull back even more, you can kind of actually see that there's more stuff going on here. There's sort of this thing going on the outside, and then this thing going on. There's a lot of stuff, and then way down in here, there's this, and then that's where I'm typing. What we have here is sort of Inception going on here. Or, have you guys ever had those Ukrainian dolls where they have the little doll inside the... Yeah, that's kind of what's going on here. We'll get into more of that as we go on in the units. But at this point, you don't got to worry about it. Just accept what's given to you. And we're going to type a piece of code right there. Okay, here's the process. What you type first is the thing you want to change. So let's change the label. And I named it LB. What's happening? Notice what's happening? As I start to type, C# is smart. And it uses a process that you'd probably call autocomplete. That's the commercial name for it. When programmers realized that people liked this feature, They went, oh, we need to give it a name that users will use, so especially with things like smartphones. So they called it autocomplete, because it makes sense, that's what it is. But actually, the programmer name for this that we had before that it's called IntelliSense. It's like intelligence, but what it's trying to do is intelligently sense what you're doing. So the second you typed an L and a B, it went, oh, do you mean LBL output? Yeah, that's what I mean. So go ahead, hit enter. I love this. I don't have to type. I can just let it do the work for me. So step one is you type the name of the object. And how do you know its name? Well, you just named it. So of course you know its name. That's the name of your object. Then you put a dot. The dot allows you to access all of its properties. The same way you did when you were designing in the window, it now appears in an IntelliSense drop-down list. So I want to change what it says. So I'm going to go to the property called name. And again, you can let it autocomplete for you if you hit enter. Okay, so first is the object, then a dot, and then the property. Okay, object.property. And then, because it's code, we're going to use an equal sign. Okay? To be honest, that's actually a terrible name for that. It's really not an equal sign. I mean, it is. I know it is. But from math class, you'd be confused by that. There's actually a better name for it. Okay? Forget computer science for a sec. Okay? Actually, just forget it for a sec. You're going to get a little crazy lesson here for a second. Let me just jump ahead a little bit. Okay, super simple math. I may have done this with you guys before. Okay? What's that called? Actually, let me rephrase my question. What is that? Addition what? No, not sign. Addition what? Like, what's it doing? It's adding, right? Could you call it an addition function? Like on your calculator, would you call it the addition button? It's a function, right? It performs a function. It's a mathematical function. Another name for it, you often see this in math class when they call it the order of what? Operations, is you could call it not a function, but an operation. That's actually the more accurate name for it. It's an operation. Actually, more specifically, it's an operator. The operator performs an operation. Now, you can super impress your math teacher today because these two things are also called something. They're called operands. Ooh, you'll sound so smart in math class. It's an operand. That operator performs an operation on these two operands, and it gives you a result. Some of you might be taking math right now that's dealing with this. Anyone seen that before? What's that? F of x. It's a function in math. It's a function performing something on, what's x called? Anyone know? Variable? Kind of. Yeah, you're on the right idea. So these math terms coming out, they do start to mesh a little bit with computer science, but let's not sweat it too much. So if I switch this to this symbol, what would you technically call that? That is the negative operator that performs a negation operation on these, or the minus operator that performs a subtraction operation on these two operands. Now, what's this? Or no, forget numbers. We'll go to variables, math. What's happening here? What are these two things, x and 5, based on what we just said? They're operands. What could this be? An operator operating on these two things. What's it doing? It's not doing addition, it's not doing subtraction. All it's doing is it's placing the 5 into the x. It's making x 5. So to be honest, the accurate name for this, and in computer science we like to use the word assign it, the number 5. It's the assignment operator. Isn't that nerdy? Holy moly. We are assigning a 5 to x. That is slightly different than seeing if x and 5 are equal. In math, they take tons of shortcuts on this stuff, but I don't. So here, I am assigning it a value. Well, I'm going to give it a new words. I'm going to say goodbye. Now, because those are words, because good and bye are actually words, we're going to make sure the computer doesn't get confused. Whenever you're going to give it words, put them inside of quotation marks, like you're quoting somebody, right? So by putting them in quotation marks, it doesn't get confused and trying to do formulas. It doesn't try to subtract good and bye. It doesn't try to do any math. It goes, oh, okay, you're just talking about words. Okay? Now, code has got one last piece. Well, specifically this programming language. When it gets to the end of a line, it doesn't assume you're done until you put a symbol to mark the end of the line. Just like in English class, you put a period to mark the end of a sentence. But the symbol that's used in C# to mark the end of a line is the semicolon. Okay? So this is the actual line of code I want from you. Okay? And let's be clear about what it is. Object.property equals a new value and then a semicolon at the end. Try it. Play it and click your button. Okay, so now we play this, and we've added one line of code, but it actually doesn't work. Oh, why? No. The property I selected shouldn't be that. If I want to change what it says, what's the property I would change? Text, right. Of course I did that mistake on purpose to make sure you were paying attention. So let's see what that does. It's the text property we want to change. Whoa. We actually have it performing a really boring, simple function, but it's just the start, okay? It's just the start of this. Okay? It's an important start. All of this is in the notes. You can see the exact same piece of code is in the notes. Okay? Well, not exactly, but and it breaks it down. That's the label, that's the text property, that's the assignment operator, that's the new value, and that's the semicolon to end the line. Okay? So exciting, I know. All right. Here's the next thing we're going to do. We're going to take it up a notch. Let's add a picture to our design. So go back to your design and add a picture to it somewhere. Of anything. I don't care what it is. A picture box with anything you want in there. Don't spend a million years doing this, though, because we're going to run out of time. So find a picture box, drag it on there, and stick a picture in it somehow. Which you should know, because we went over that. So I'm going to put the turtle in there. And remember, there's that property called size mode if you want. Okay, so we're a little out of order here. Normally, we should have done the design first. Okay, but we're kind of backtracking a bit here. So we have our label, we have our button, we've now added an object. Once you've added a picture box with a picture, I want you to name that picture box. Okay? And you can call it something like pic. I'm just going to call mine pic image. P-I-C-I-M image. Pic image. Again, the acronym, the prefix, the three-letter prefix, doesn't have to be P-I-C. It could be other things. But we got that on there. Okay? Bless you. Yeah. Oh, okay. So, excuse me. Okay. Here's something that could come up, in case it ever does. If you accidentally close your design on the tabs and you just have code, oh crap, what do I do now? The easy way is, again, go up to View, Designer, and it should come back. Okay? So short story, when something goes bad in C#, check the menus. The menus might give you the solution up there. Okay, one other thing I want you to do about that picture box is I want you to set the property called visible to false. So it starts off invisible. So when you play it, it should look like this, but the picture is there but invisible. So set visible to be false. Remember, toggling that is really easy if you just double click the word true false. It'll just quickly do that. Okay, so make the picture invisible. Anyone need a second on that? Okay, again, I don't want you to spend a million years doing a world's fanciest design. Okay? All right, so I'm going to jump ahead a little bit now. Go back to the code for the button, which again you can get at by double clicking, or you can switch up top to code. Okay, so now we're going to add another instruction to this. So we've just given it one thing to do. We said when you click the change button, change the text to goodbye. Well, let's add another one. Let's take our picture, image, dot visible to be true. Now, the nice thing about true is you do not have to put it in quotes. Even though it's a word, it's a special word. It's either true or false, right? So the computer will totally understand you when you put the word true in there. Does anyone notice anything else about the word true that's a little bit different? It's blue, right. We'll get into this more in our next unit, but a blue word has special meaning to C#. It essentially means this is a word you can't ever use for some of your own code. You can't, for example, name one of your buttons true because I've already taken that word. It's called a reserved word. Like a reserved table at a restaurant, you can't have it. I'm reserving this word. So let's test that. Here's the nice thing about computer science. You can test all the time. Change it. Ah, the picture pops up, right? Cool. Let's add another instruction to this. Let's say button, btn, change, dot set, dot enabled equals false. So true is a reserved word, false is a true reserved word. So now I'll make the button enabled to be false. So now when you try this, you click the button, you can only click it once, because now the button is no longer available to the user to use. So they get one shot at that button. Seems simple, doesn't it? And it is. It shouldn't be this difficult. You say the object dot property equals a new value, semicolon. Object dot property equals new value, semicolon. Okay? Look, I even had it in today's notes. Object dot property equals new value. Okay? The object is the thing that you designed. And you named it, so you should know what it's called. The dot is just to get at it. The properties is the same list you had in the properties window. It changes something about the thing. The equals, or more specifically, the assignment operator, means I'm giving it a new value. And then the new value is whatever you want to change it to. If what you want to change it to is words, then put it in quotation marks. If it's just a number, then you don't have to put it in quotation marks. If it's something like true, false, you won't have to put it in quotation marks. And through practice, you'll get to that. And then finally, the semicolon at the very end. Okay? Like this. img happy.visible equals true. Boom. Okay. Let's kick it up a notch before the end of the period. Let's kick it up a serious notch. FRM example. That's our form. The next code I'm going to show you is a little more complicated, but it follows the same basic principle. Dot active form dot window state equals, shrink this down a little bit, form window state and dot maximized. Okay. Now, let me zoom in on that. Okay? So this one was a little bit more complicated, but it follows the same basic principle. That's the name of our form, but we added a little more code to it. Okay? That was because for this particular instruction, it kind of required the computer to dig a little deeper. I don't need you to completely understand what's going on there, but it's the same basic process. This is the new thing I'm changing it to. This is the property I'm changing. That's the object I'm changing. Questions? Yes? Okay, so just double click your button again. Yes?
I exited out of that, the thingamabobber one that you showed us how to get back.
Yeah. View, go to the View menu, and then Designer, or Code. All right, so let's try that now. Did that do anything? Let's see. I play it, I click Change It. It worked. It maximized it with one click. Let's kick it up another notch. LBL output. Let me zoom in. Hang on. Dot font equals. Okay, here again it gets a little more complicated, but the sort of general idea is still the same. For this you say new font. Oops. And I'm going to say Tahoma. Whoops. And you can pick a different font if you want. Comma 30. So this is, again, the same general principle, but what's happening on the other side of the equal sign is a little more complicated. More complicated, in fact, than generally I go into in this course. This is, again, a bit of a look ahead at what I do in my grade 11 course. This is not the kind of general code you're going to be writing for this course. But I just wanted to show you the general principle is the same. So does it work? Yeah, notice it's subtle, but the font itself changed to a different font. Let's try one more. Let's try that again. LBL output dot font equals a new font. LBL output dot font, comma, font style. Whoops. Dot underline. Okay, let me pull back. My apologies, I did that one pretty quick. So and by the way, all this code is in the notes. Okay? So just again, this is not something you need to know at this point, but I'm just showing you a little look ahead that it's actually doing what I'm asking it to do by placing that code in there. Okay? It's just an example. Okay? Generally, what you'll need to do this unit is the first couple lines that we did. Remember I said we'd kick it up a notch. So really, it's these 3 lines that are the basic core of the code of this unit. Just changing properties. But I wanted to show you that you can start exploring with this, and you can go up a notch for sure. Okay? Changing the font, making it underlined, right? So these are just some quick things to do that. Okay? Okay, for those of you who are still coding, I'm just going to stop you for 1 sec just so I can finish up today. Okay, so here it is. This is all in the notes. You can see basically the exact same things in there, and the exact same code is in there, just so you know. Let me just talk a quick couple things about the code before we wrap up today. Okay? In some ways, it's both simple and complex at the same time. For a lot of you, maybe just mimic my code. Don't worry about totally understanding it at this point and hope that comes in a little bit later, especially some of the complex stuff we did. Okay? So that one was the basic, simple sort of process there. Same with this one. Property, changing, and things like that. It's all outlined in the notes there. Okay? This one is a little more complicated, and this one even more complicated. There's a little bit more of an explanation in the notes, but again, if you really wanted to dig into the why and the how, this is something that we'll expand on in the grade 11 course. Okay? That's the thing about coding, is sometimes you learn a little, but it seems like you're on this tip of this iceberg, and there's no doubt that's true. But I don't like to present too much to you at once, or you'll just lose the main message there. Okay? And that's it. That is it. Now,